Hi guys, Shana here. So today I wanted to share with you guys basically an update on like my 2 years as a NICU nurse. So now it's been a little over 2 years, so I made 2 years in July. That's when I officially started as a NICU nurse, and it's been a wild, crazy, beautiful ride. I've experienced everything from excitement to anxiety to sadness to all the things. Like, I can't even deal with the fact that it's already been 2 years. It's kind of wild. So I guess first I'll start with, I think that as a new grad, when you first come in, you feel very anxious and excited. Anxiety takes over more when you're on your own. So when I talked about it before, I had 6 months in my residency program where I was with a preceptor and talked through the whole time. We had educational classes, all the things. And then I went through phases. So there was 1 to 4 for the phases. Yeah, or 3. I can't even remember at this point. But we had phases. And like 1 started off with like the kids that are basically like almost healthy, and then 4 or 3 is like where the sick kids are. Worst of the worst assignment, not worst, I don't want to say worst, not worst of the worst assignments, but like a very complicated sick kid, like the sickest kids on the unit. In between you have like mild to moderate respiratory issues or any other type of issue, and then also like getting admissions. And admissions is like on other ball game because you never know what you're gonna get. You could get like a simple, we're just here for sugars, or mild respiratory distress syndrome where like they might need a nasal cannula or a little bit of CPAP. But then there's some times where it's like crazy intubation, gotta drop lines now, kids like about to code or did code at delivery, you know what I mean? Like there's just so many different things that could happen when you get admission. So that's kind of towards the end, like with phase 3 and the sick kids. So anyways, aside from all of that, when I first got off orientation, I was so scared because I was like, oh, what if I get something that I haven't had before? Which happened to me my very first day off orientation. I got an ECMO kid. ECMO was just a whole other ball game, super complicated. You have a person sitting there 24 hours that's running the pump. So immediately I was like terrified. And charge was like, don't worry, you're gonna have another charge in there with you. She has another assignment, you can ask them questions. You have somebody that's in there 24/7 running the pump for you, like you're gonna be fine. I was fine, and it really was not that hard, like as hard as I probably thought it was gonna be. But you still get anxious when it's something new and something like so complicated and like extreme. So I've come full circle from that. I'm very comfortable with the ECMO kid. If anything, I feel like they're the easier kids to take care of. It's not as many tasks. You don't touch them as much. You want to touch them as little as possible because you're not trying to like stress them out. So it's a completely different way of thinking and handling your patient. I'm much more comfortable in my job. I'm at the point where I'm getting asked to be a preceptor, and I'm like, I've had students before, like nursing students. I just don't know if I'm at the point where I want to be a preceptor just yet, but they are on me about it. I think that once you hit the 2-year mark, you get asked about like different positions. So I've had people ask like, why don't you go try out for charge? Why don't you join my team, which is where like you're dealing with the central lines on our unit. We have a team just for that who hangs like the fluids and gives the meds through it and etc., just to help with infection, because it's the #1 cause of death in our field. So any way that we can minimize that, that's what we're going to do, particularly at our hospital, which is large enough to do things like that. I'm also at the point where I feel comfortable enough to also want to explore travel nursing. So I am at that point right now where I am just deciding what I want to do now moving forward. I think long term, I love my hospital, so I'd want to come back there if I did leave to go travel. But I think right now I'm just kind of like curious what else is out there. And then also, if you've been looking at the contracts that they're offering recently, it's insane. So I think that's like where I'm leaning the most right now. So I will give you guys an update on if I do end up leaving and doing that. Of course, I'll tell you guys all about it. The process right now is that I also have other things going on in life to where I am not sure which way I'm leaning per se just yet. But I guess we'll see. I think now that I've been in the NICU for a good amount of time now, I think I've just seen a lot more. I've had a primaries where you have a sole primary baby that you take care of when you come in, and like other nurses can pick up the same primary as you, so you guys can share that kid. So if she's here and you're not here, she takes care of the kid, and vice versa. Or whoever came on first and started their like 3 in a row or 2 in a row, then they'll keep that kid until they're off, and then when you're back on, you have the kid. So that happens a lot on our unit. I used to say that I didn't think I wanted a primary just because when you first come off, depending on how sick that kid is or how young that kid is, that's one thing, but you get stuck in the same assignment, same routine for a while, and you forget other skills or don't do other skills for a while. And then when it gets close to them coming home, they get put with like 2 other kids, so then you have like a 3 baby assignment, and it's just like bottle feeding and changing diapers, and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you lose your skills when there's such simple babies like that. So that's some reasons why some people don't want primaries. Me in particular, when I first started, that's why I didn't want to. When I chose to pick up a primary, I knew what I would be taking on, and I felt comfortable in my skills at that point, so I said yes. But I've only had one thus far, and I'll probably keep it like that. Like, I think I'll go longer periods in between my primaries. Some people like repetitively want a primary, and that's just not my vibe, because I do like to switch it up when I come into work, and just keep my skills fresh, but that's about it. And I also do get attached, so that's another thing. That's another reason why I try to stray away from having a primary. Moving on in that subject, I think the longer that you're in the field, you learn to compartmentalize. So I am an empath, so if I see somebody crying, I start crying. If something sad is happening, I feel it. It weighs me down. I bring it home from work, which is something that I try really hard not to do. I try to leave work where it's at, but either way, like, taking care of these kids and seeing them day in, day out when you come into work, and just being involved in their care, it's like impossible to not feel for them and want them to get better, and etc. So though I think the longer you're in it, you learn to compartmentalize, it does not make it any easier, especially dealing with death in the NICU. So I don't want to jinx myself, so I'm gonna, like, knock on wood, but it is something that I think would rock me. I have seen it happen in the pod. It was not my kid, or a kid that I've taken care of that like might pass after like I've left, could be in the same week. But it's sad, and you run things in your head nonstop. I think regardless, like you think about it, and it weighs with you. And each kid that you take care of that passes, and depending on how traumatic it was when they passed, you learn something from it, and you remember them, and yeah, so that is an interesting part in the NICU. And I think that when I talk to you about my job, and they're like, oh, I could never do that, I could never take care of babies, it would just be so sad, and what I will say is that even though it is true, it is sad sometimes, most of the time they get better, and they get to go home with their families and live a happy, full life. And that is what keeps me going, because I know it is not the 100%. I think that the longer that you're in it, you are actually able to educate others on basic things that you'll see in the NICU more easily, and you feel comfortable talking to parents. Even though I don't have a kid of my own, like, I can explain what happens to kids in the NICU because I work in the NICU and I see this day in and day out. This is what I've learned for months. This is like my specialty, so I think I do get comfortable in that area, and like soothing parents and like knowing what to say or how to explain things in a more simplified way, because nothing is simple really about the NICU. They're completely different from adults. So even like we'll have like parents who are nurses or doctors, but they work with adults and they find themselves still asking questions, and of course they should, but they trust in your answers because they know that it's completely different from adults. And when we'll explain certain things, they're like, wow, I never knew that. And it's like, well, yeah, most people didn't. I didn't know either. So I think that that's pretty cool. Like, the longer that you're in it, you are able to explain things in a simplified way that will be able to reach the masses. So all in all, my 2 years as a NICU nurse has been amazing. Wouldn't change for the world. I would 10 out of 10 come back, recommend, and keep going into the same field. Oh, and another thing, we get floated, right? So you get floated to like the PICU or other pediatric floors, like that might be pediatric med surg or like pediatric general surgery units and things like that. And I hate it. That's one thing that I hate, probably will always hate, is getting floated. But I know that if I chose to travel, that could happen. I think maybe it might make me a little bit more comfortable, but if I don't get a baby when I get floated to another unit, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with you? Or when it takes you 10 times longer to do a task because you can't find anything. Fun times. So I think that I hate that when our census drops, because then we get floated. But for the most part, I think that we stayed up for a while. Another thing is just dealing with COVID in the NICU. It sucks because these babies come out and they don't get to see their parents for a while, or if they are well enough to be discharged but their parents aren't doing well and they still have to stay in the hospital because their parents might have COVID or something like that, then they have to get discharged to family members when they should be spending that time with their parents. That just makes me sad. So I just want to say that any of you that might be pregnant or know anybody that's pregnant, or I mean, you could possibly be wanting to get pregnant, just make sure that you do your research, you get the vaccine if that is something that you want to do, and just take care of yourselves, because that is just not something that I would want anybody to have to deal with. And just know that it does affect the NICU and it does affect these babies. So yeah, that is my 2-year update in the NICU. If you have any particular questions that you want me to answer, please let me know. Ask down below. Maybe if I can fit it into a different video, then I will, or you can just ask me on IG and I'll answer. Don't forget to subscribe at ShanaCubana, and I love you guys. Bye. Thanks for watching.